This is an Envoice Media podcast.
Trust me, the corporate SWAT team won't let me get us in too much trouble. Bayesian thinking. And that is something that I don't know why it's not taught in third grade.
You get them to click on something, and then you follow them around for the rest of time with Facebook retargeting.
An important concept that is almost difficult because it's a double-edged sword is the concept of like base demand versus marketing-driven demand. You get up to 172 buckets that you and me and everyone can fit into. Once you have those definitions unlocked, then you can come up with predictive attributes.
You're listening to Manipulation Games Psychology and Marketing Podcast with your hosts, Gene and Darren.
Welcome to Manipulation Games Podcast. I'm Darren with our marketing expert, Gene, and we have a special guest today.
We do.
His name is Andrew, and he is a data nerd.
That's right, folks. I am. So happy to be here, Darren, Gene.
So tell me, well, I know you both are friends, or close friends. Tell me about your relationship and how you guys kind of met.
I mean, I think that's a little too intimate of a topic.
The origin story is mythic, but we knew each other in high school. We were data nerds. We learned JavaScript.
There might have been a girl.
There was always a girl
involved. Nice.
or there's two or three
Isn't
or four.
But the girl went away, and we stayed friends.
Yeah, that seldom happens.
That's interesting.
So tell me, like, what do you do? Like, what's your field of expertise, and where do you work?
So, I am currently an account manager for TransUnion's Global Business Solutions, and on that note, I do have to just say, guys, my opinions are my own. They don't reflect TransUnion. I may allude to our capabilities, but not our products, etc. And that's it. Can we? Is that okay? Can we be real?
Put an
can we
asterisk?
that?
Yeah, we can put that.
We can have that. And again, at any point in time we are wandering into any sensitive territory, the safe word is banana.
Okay, my safe word is Wimbledon, but
Wimbledon. I would feel like banana is way too easy of a safe word to be saying.
How often do you say banana in any conversation?
What did you have for lunch? I had a banana. It's like red alert. There's gonna be guys coming up the elevator.
Corporate
in
SWAT
black
team.
suits.
the corporate SWAT team. Guys, trust me, the corporate SWAT team won't let me get us in too much trouble.
Andrew is leaking data.
If we want to really be safe, let's just monitor the stock price on the big screen here. But I think we should be good. So to your point, Gene and I, like, we both graduated college same time into what was known then as the Great Recession, and it was an odd time to go out and find a job, and we were both like, nah, let's hustle. And we were both kind of working as freelancers in this time for certain brands, getting into the marketing space, really just saying yes to everything, and like that early hustle mindset. And it's like, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I'm certified in that. Yeah, give me your money. And after a few years of that, Gene and I realized, wait, we're both doing the same thing. Let's like go from freelance hustler, which is like ew, to let's start a company.
Wow.
And very few people we knew did that, and we still like hear about that. Like, you guys have that company, and it's like,
really?
Yeah, Bloom Alder marketing's still out there somewhere in the vaporware of the internet. But really, that was such a great experience for us because we decided to take things seriously and lean into our actual skills with creative and data, and Gene with his psychology background. And we ended up getting very deeply into programmatic advertising and digital advertising.
Oh, wow.
Which at that time I had played with, and I was like deeply fascinated with what is actually going on here.
So was this back in like 2008?
This would have been a little bit after that, but I actually started at that time.
Okay.
I've been continuously running campaigns on Google since 2008. Like, I never stopped.
Wow. Okay.
And really, we were thinking like a great chance. We partnered with Google early on, and back then you would be a partner with Google or Facebook, and you pick up the phone and get some support, and you wouldn't get anyone lower than a VP. Like now it's
so
considerably different. But really, we were fascinated in getting any edge we could within the technology. And think about what Google search was. Still blows my mind. Like, Larry and Sergey put something real out there.
Yeah.
Like this information retrieval engine that is so much more nuanced, that has this component of trust and authority to it.
Yeah.
And we don't think about that. We just see, like, Google search is helpful because it's the cost prop basis and the value prop for where you see advertisements on Google is a very easy visual metaphor. It's, a ranked list, right?
Yeah,
It's almost
yeah.
so obvious that it's not. But like the higher up you are, the more likely you are to be clicked.
Right,
And that's not
right.
obvious to people. And therefore,
Yeah.
there's value to that.
Yeah.
Now, Google could have been greedy.
Yeah.
And they could have enforced this auction mechanic that was just pay us the most money and you'll get that top spot. And we'll sell it for a fixed fee. But they were so idealistic.
Yeah, their whole tagline was "Don't be evil."
Don't be
Back in
evil.
the day, yeah,
Don't be evil. And they said, how do we enforce trust in this mechanic? So the price you pay for that click, we're going to force rules to make it quality and relevant so that you can't just hijack other people's brands. But there's actual auction game there that the price you pay is what another advertiser would be willing to pay for that same spot.
Yeah.
And so suddenly, okay, this is now a deeply complex mathematical object.
yeah.
And I got obsessed with that notion of what is the auction-based game theory.
Oh wow!
Because now you're in
theory.
game theory. And with Google search, it's just kind of more obvious to see that splayed out. But almost every programmatic ad placement involves some sort of that mechanic. There's different auction types with Google. It's a non-truthful, Bayesian, generalized second price auction. They all have different names. On social media, like newsfeed-based social media, like Facebook, LinkedIn, it's a Vickery auction or some type. There's many different
there's
auction
different
mechanics. And I remember like chasing around like math students at my university. Like I had a crazy eccentric math major roommate at my college who knew this stuff, and I would like chase them down or hide his drugs until he would like explain like these papers to me. And we just kept following that line of inquiry. And I think we were able to really set apart our service early on because we could speak to this at such a deep level. We
Yeah.
were such powerful ninjas.
You guys
in
must
this
have
space.
felt amazing because you held the power, right, of like the secrets. You reverse engineered like the auction.
To a fault. And it's almost like, and I had to unlearn a lot of this as I grew into more of a professional sales role because like it's important. Like we could take people into the weeds. We knew that, and we would always win. If we could take someone into the technicality of the value we're powering for you by operating this crazy mathematical system, we knew we could not lose.
Yeah,
So they would say,
wow.
these guys get it. I'm going to give them my business. These are two young, smart guys. Run my
Right.
my key for self-defense Kubaton product, which was our first signed customer in a coffee shop.
Cool.
How's Phil? In any case,
I don't know. We should call him
call Phil.
I like that brand though. It's like you guys were just way like two smart data nerds, right?
Yeah.
And if you're like a company, it's like they're way smarter than
Yeah.
I am. Like I'm not gonna get to their level.
And the thing I would highlight about that, right, is what Andrew's describing there is that we went from wide to narrow in terms of our specialty and kind of our focus,
Nice.
which is kind of very similar to how I think, again, with this kind of invoice media experiment, a lot of times right now we're starting wide, we're trying different things, but slowly we're going to narrow, right?
Right.
The topics, the specificity of what we're doing, the audience we're trying to serve,
It's like any
and you.
digital campaign. Cast a
is.
wide net, cast a fine net, and you know that you have captured something in there, right? Then it's just a matter of trimming fat, right? It's just optimization.
Optimization.
Which Gene is now vastly exceeds my skill set at. One of those principles that I think we learned, and is probably my mission to kind of communicate today as someone who's just gone from two guys in a dog agency to boutique agency to massive, ad tech house, is that the advantage isn't really resource based. It's not like, these companies have tons of data and they've got tons of brilliant people working on it. It's almost an appreciation for the same nuances that we discovered early on that I now see everywhere, that underline almost all of the crazy, almost magical solutions and experiences that I've been able to contribute to.
Yeah.
And I think we talked a little bit about this one, like the best principle that I think someone young and new coming out of college into maybe a similar economic scenario as we did is Bayesian thinking. And that is something that I don't know why it's not taught in third grade, but it's a mindset, and it's something that becomes an adaptation.
Can you explain?
psychologically.
Yeah, I've heard this term before in but in artificial AI papers.
So Bayes' theorem is a very, very simple expression of probability, and just to summarize it, it means like not just the probability of A given B of like what's going to happen if this condition is met. It tries to account for your own biases that you brought to the table before you even considered that probability, right? It's the probability of A given B given A already. And people are not psychologically equipped to handle that. And that underlines so much of digital marketing as well as branding, as well as...
Can you give us like a concrete example?
Here's a great example and this shamelessly comes from the book The Scout Mindset by Julia Galef. Read that. And she talks, it's a psychology book, and she just talks about how people need to understand this in everyday life because it'll change your mind. So here's the scenario. Who am I running this on? I'm going to run it on Gene because he's newer to this. All right.
Yeah, I don't understand. I actually, like, we talk about this stuff, but I don't understand Bayesian thinking at all.
In this scenario, you're walking down the street and you see someone else is walking past you, right? And the only attribute that you're allowed to observe from this person is you notice that they appear to be kind of shy, little timid, right? And they was like, that person seems shy, right? I'm not giving you any other information than that. Then you walk by, and then I jump out of the alley and survey you and say, hey, Gene, okay, based on your observation, you need to answer me, was this person a librarian or a farmer? Go.
Farmer.
Why?
Farmers, I imagine, are more isolated. Librarians work in a library. It's a customer service job. I don't know.
Right. I mean, you're taking information outside. Yeah, the instinct is to take information from outside of it, like what time of day was it? Were they more likely to be farming? That's valuable. That's the same principle. But
was I supposed to answer librarian?
A lot of people think, librarians are shy. If I think someone's shy, they're more likely to be a librarian. Farmers are like, boister, your tractor pull.
Okay,
But turns out, like, let's grant you that. Let's say that, like, librarians are 3 times as shy as your average farmer. Guess what Bayesian inference you didn't bring to the table is that there's something like 50 times as many farmers as there are librarians. So if you concluded that this person was a librarian based off of that one observation, you would be sorely wrong.
So it's like the bias. You're using actual data as opposed to people's biases.
Exactly.
The data that we can't see that we're just inherently built in.
And there is almost so much of this data built into marketing signals.
And so Bayesian thinking is like self-corrects. Right? So how would it self-correct in this scenario?
You self-correct by remembering that prior and using it to adjust your initial inference and to teach yourself to build that into your
So next time you walk by a person, again, you get the same amount of info.
Right, and you're more likely to make a more accurate prediction over what was this person more likely to be. And that's a very simplified example. But now think about the journey that I went on to let's say Neustar's measurement lab, right? Now there are so many, think about how hard it is to be a brand, right? And like there's no shortage of marketing data. All these marketing tactics we run, like one of their great advantages is that they produce all this exhaust data. We can mine this for insights. There's some impressions, clicks, there's almost so much data that it can paint any story you want. And guess what? You're a brand selling, sparkling water, and you've got your search agency over here and your social agency there and your traditional direct mail agency, and they're all lying to you and they're all showing you the same report and they're all saying, no, we take credit for 100% of your sales. Look, the data's right here. And guess what? They've all done their job. They have all successfully intersected their messaging across the target cohort, assuming they've done their job right. And they've got data that says, they're all
taking credit for the purchase.
They've all impacted the consumer, and they all recorded a conversion down the line, as was their mission, and they're all paid on an affiliate basis. Money, please. And now, wait, hang on, I have to pay the same cut 3 different times for something that's worth 200% of my product value, right? Something's not adding up here. So very early on, and this has been done kind of since World War II was really the origin of this mathematical line of inquiry on factory optimization, right? Do we produce guns or butter? What's our mathematical basis for understanding the outcome of when the war beat the Germans, right?
Yeah.
And very soon, companies like Nielsen figured out, okay, what if we start surveying certain people and understand, what is the real value basis of a commercial slot on TV? And that mathematical operation just grew and grew and grew. And get to today where now there's even like less of a stability behind the persistence of pseudonymous identifiers, right? The stuff that we depend on every day to see if there even is a conversion associated with my
Define
linear
pseudonymous
channel.
identifier.
That'd be a cookie, Gene.
A cookie.
Okay. A maid.
It's a tracking code that follows you
Right.
around the internet. Okay.
Right. Well, that's the next episode. And the idea is like, well, what if you could answer those same questions? What is the impact of all my marketing channels on my actual marketing outcomes? How much product did I ship, right? How many people are signing up to be with me? How many, how many visits to my showroom, right? Whatever is your outcome, explain that in terms of the actual mathematical basis of my marketing inputs in such a way that I have trust again, right?
Yeah.
So I can take all that conversion data that the platforms are reporting to me, and I can put it right where it belongs, which is right in the trash. And it turns out, so a lot of brands start saying, let's trust math
So,
to answer this for us.
Yeah.
so is this heading towards the marketing mix? Is that
This is marketing mix measurement.
Okay.
Right?
MMM?
Right? And it's having a heyday again, right? Because people...
So let's explain what marketing mix.
what is marketing?
So essentially, you have this issue where everybody's claiming a conversion
Yeah.
because they detect it, right?
Yeah.
But the idea is that if you're on the side of a bus, if you're on a billboard, if you're on television, if you're on the internet, if you're on social media, you're doing all these different things,
Right.
and all these multiple things are potentially interacting with the same person, just from different directions. What is the level of credit
Exactly.
that each of these different channels get?
What's the
Right.
incrementality?
What is it? So like 10% goes to the ad on the side of the bus, 20% goes to the billboard, right? So they're not all claiming we got this one conversion. You were 10% of that interaction.
Because Gene, the planner for the brand, has to decide, like, his CMO gave him $20 million to spend this year, and he has to decide how to carve up that pie chart, right? And how to release it and answer Gene's favorite question: where do you spend the next dollar, right?
Yeah.
To me, like, we get asked the question all the time: what's the best channel? Like, people come up, a lot of marketing noobs, that's a fair question,
yeah.
right? And they say, oh, what's the best channel? Like, I'm trying to reach, like, teenagers. Should I be on TikTok? What's the, like, first off, like, it's such an unanswerable question, but it's because they don't have that Bayesian mindset, right?
I see.
They don't understand. And there's two answers I really like. One is, like, Neil Patel's answer, which I'm allowed to steal from Neil Patel because I work with him. So anyone should be allowed to steal from
Is
Neil
it
Patel.
Neil Patel and Eric Sue? They have a major marketing podcast.
They have a killer podcast. Love those guys.
and used to
Leveling
work
Up.
with them at some point.
Yeah. Neil Patel's favorite answer to the question, what's the best channel, is it's CRO. Like, the best channel is turning a 1% conversion rate into a 2% conversion rate. And if you can do that,
Yeah.
so
That's your best channel.
focus on your best channel is your experience. As close as you
CRO
can get.
conversion rate optimization.
That's right. And it's the joke is it's not a real channel, but it's something you need to be doing anyway before you even think about what's the best channel. But let's say you've got your interaction down and you have to accomplish this plan to really effectively listen to the signals that are out there and put your chips in the best spot, right? The answer to the question, what's the best channel, is the best channel is what a finely tuned Bayesian model of all of your data inputs using that Bayesian logic of what's happening to this signal when I'm doing this. What is my Google doing when my Facebook's going up or down and my YouTube's going up or down? And balancing that against not just your media factors, but all the factors that impact your outcomes. And it's almost like an econometric model at some point and a brand model. Like
So you're saying that no channel essentially lives in a vacuum. No. They're all essentially interacting to each other.
Exactly.
It's kind of somehow like sometimes we used to run these campaigns that were like a 1-2 punch, right? Where you get in front of somebody on LinkedIn because you're trying to get in front of a CEO of a company or somebody who's a decision maker at a big corporation. You get them to click on something and then you follow them around for the rest of time with Facebook retargeting.
Exactly. And even like a lot of times brands will position, if this is set up right, they'll start to position their media in such a way that they can decompose it later in more predictable formats. So it's almost like, imagine like you'll do TV commercials. You'll do like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And you'll do that. Then you start looking for that signal in your sales outcomes later on after that lag impact has occurred. You can start decomposing this into think of your marketing as deliberately as like sine waves of certain certain rates of which you put messaging and signals out into the world.
So basically, you're talking about using statistical modeling. You have an input, you have a black box where you don't know what's happening.
Yes.
And you have the output because, in digital marketing, we do have the cookie. Would you call it a pseudonymous?
A cookie is a form of pseudonymous identifier.
Okay, so you have a cookie that theoretically you could track somebody comes to your website and makes a purchase, right? Theoretically, right?
You're not tracking somebody, you're tracking a device, you think.
Okay, tracking a device, right? But the idea is that on the massive scale, right? When you're talking about everything, TV, social media, whatever it is, really at the end of the day, it's a black box because somebody sees a billboard, right? But then later on, they walk into a grocery store and make a purchase, but there's no cookie to follow a person around there. But if you're able to use very advanced statistical modeling,
that question has an answer now.
So basically, you know that you did this in that 2-week period. The input, you have the black box, and then you have the output. This is how many sales I got in Skokie, Illinois.
Exactly, and you're bringing a geo component to that as well.
The model basically tells you whether the thing you did worked or not.
It'll show you the incrementality, and really, it's about decomposing. An important concept that is almost difficult because it's a double-edged sword is the concept of like base demand versus marketing-driven demand, right? Now, a lot of companies want to know what's the real value of our advertising. Here's the insanity way to figure that out. Turn off all your ads and see how badly your business tanks.
Okay, so base demand is when people just buy your thing without you having to do anything marketing.
So base demand is what the model solves for, and that is the amount of demand you would have that is insensitive to your media, to your marketing.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
And so that's often double-edged because so many factors go into...
So you're saying if you turned off all the Got Milk commercials for a year, how much milk would still sell?
Yes, exactly. And obviously brands have huge variance in base demand based on how established you are. What goes into base? It's stuff like your word of mouth. It's stuff like the economy. It's stuff like inflation.
Loyalty.
NPS score, all the stuff that doesn't really have a direct lever to anything that you can put programmatic working media dollars behind. And it's almost interesting, if you have more competition in the space advertising against you, and you keep the consistent amount of advertising against them, your marketing driven demand will go up because your marketing's doing more work to accomplish the same outcome versus increased competition, right? So it's a very double-edged factor, but many brands are unused to thinking it in those terms.
Yeah.
Nor do they want to do a true holdout test, turn everything off and see what happens to my outcomes because you can't afford that risk, right? And I think smart brands are thinking, okay, let's never do that. How much can we afford to keep spending? But let's rely on models to tell us what's actually happening out there.
Wow.
And that's something that, when I started joining this team at Neustar that was solving these kinds of problems for immense enterprise customers during an incredibly interestingly disruptive moment. I joined Neustar in late 2019 and started working with the cruise line industry, thinking this is great. Nothing can go horribly wrong.
Yeah, all cruises are so well run.
And yet, holy moly, it got dark. Not going to lie to you. I remember one day, but some of the last remaining days we were in an office, right? Because I haven't been in an office building since March 14th, 2020. But in the days leading up to that, I remember our top model, our brilliant woman, multiple statistical PhD holder, basically told everyone we need to take on COVID-19 as a client. We need to think about the data patterns that are affecting everyone. And all these models are at risk now, right? Because there's such a black swan event that challenges all those Bayesian. It's a new Bayesian prior.
So it threw a wrench in everything.
Suddenly the models are very threatened at not speaking to. They're speaking to a past, right? It's past data to project a future. How do we do that, right? Every day.
So you're taking on COVID-19 as a client, meaning you now have to incorporate COVID-19 as a variable in all the statistical models.
As many variables.
In the statistical model.
COVID cases, COVID deaths. There was remember there was hoarding, right? There were instances of hoarding. There are variables in the system and retail scarcity, right?
So when you talk about toilet paper,
yes,
COVID-19 is a positive.
Exactly. In terms of price elasticity, sure, right? But it's on. Think about the Bayesian impact of what if businesses couldn't have toilet paper, right?
Right,
What happens
right.
to sales of, there's a non-zero amount of people who are going to.
What happens to work productivity when a company doesn't have any toilet paper in the office?
Everything just collapses.
Yeah, and
The end of civilization.
I know that was the
That'd be
first
hilarious.
question.
Apparently,
I
people
asked
never
the
heard of
model.
showers before.
No. And so the most amazing thing was our models became more accurate coming out of that.
Wow, really?
Yes. They were actually, produced less error, had a better fit to the data. Now, what's interesting right now is actually the most difficult point. We're currently still in like the pandemic hangover where the trailing data that brands might bring to these models is so exceptional because now like the last 3 years of data was in the pandemic is so exceptional. So it's actually right now as it's never been harder.
And by exceptionally mean accurate. Like so
Accurate.
basically you guys are making projections and
it's harder to make those projections because the data you based on it, the most recent few years of data was so abnormal out of the long term. Now, to answer on the brand side, brands were a bit more resilient because like base demand and brand equity, it's hard to have a brand model. It's something that like we've never really cracked, and it's something I don't really look at, but looking at those intangible factors that lead to like what is the true health of a brand and brand equity and consideration.
so you're talking about like brand awareness.
And like I have a deep skepticism for focus groups.
Okay. No, it is. But in terms of brand awareness, one thing to maybe kind of solidify it in people's minds is that there were experiments in laboratories in psychology where people would be subliminally flashed the Apple logo and they would do better on creative tasks after the fact.
That's true.
Versus an IBM logo subliminally
That's true.
flashed, right? And that is if you're talking about a tangible effect of talking about something very fuzzy like a brand, is that when a brand it becomes so tied to a particular idea, subliminally flashing it to people can actually change outcomes.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, right? So let's take this Bayesian principle, right? And let's bring in the consumer into this. Let's like literally do, because there's a psychological component to consumers, right? There's propensities. There's not just the econometrics. There's not just like Darren buys, socks every month. It's like Darren wants to be seen as someone who buys the best wool socks for hiking.
Okay.
And by the way, Andrew, I think one of the things that would I think help ground this conversation is, and you don't have to pick it now, but like a particular
Give it to me.
industry or a particular like company, a hypothetical one, and talking about how these factors actually affect their business. So let's say a sock company.
A sock company.
Yeah, just like the brand awareness, statistical modeling for a sock company.
So this is really interesting because I put that more in like the inelastic good category.
So we could talk about it as a story.
Right. Well, I almost think like that's the most challenging aspect of marketing, right? This changed my concept of the definition of marketing, right? I used to like...
How do you define marketing?
I define marketing now as the hypothesis that a company can take actions to affect their sales.
Okay.
That sink in. Hypothesis. Okay. Why? Think about like socks is a great example for inelastic goods, right? Like I think a lot about this episode of Rick and Morty I forgot what this was, where Jerry had this like Mad Men style pitch and he had to like come up with a slogan for apples and like and he came up with hungry for apples, and it was supposed to be a joke like this guy's such an idiot, but I'm like, no, that's great. That's like exactly it. Like what, like think about the extreme end of where it's so difficult to have an impact, where your product is inelastic. Like let's you come up.
Can you define inelastic?
It's demand is relatively insensitive to price. So these are fungible goods. So like come up with an ad campaign for bricks, for corn, for salt.
So there are things that, like for example, price doesn't go up and down.
Right.
Like
There's
luxury goods are very elastic.
Everyone's going to have, right? It's the stuff that's so basic and is bought and sold at market rate, right? And so usually you don't see a lot of branding attached to these fungible items, right? So that's why it's so interesting of a challenge to attach to that, right? Because I don't believe that. I believe Jerry was right, and I believe that some people are hungry for apples and others are not. And so what if there was a way to get into that? Now, like one of the most famous examples, right, is bottled water. And I know you're a fan of this one, right? Where like you'll go into a supermarket or somewhere and there'll be a nice big fridge with bottled water in it, and there will be 20 brands of bottled water, and they're all selling functionally the same good, yet the prices will vary. So what are you actually paying for there? And it's all the associations of the brand for the ultimate inelastic good, like freaking water. Right. So clearly there is some value to this, and there is a gradient across the folks who might assign value to that. Therefore, there is a Bayesian prior that can be exploited in targeting and measurement.
I love that example of using water, bottled water. It's like, who's going to win? Is it whoever markets the product the best.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And when you're saying kind of the Bayesian prior, essentially you're saying that you're exploiting almost a Bayesian error in people's thinking.
Yeah.
And that's what basically, like when they go buy something for 5 times the price, even though it's functionally the same, just different branding.
It's the tension between products being sold at market, like out of a stall of walnuts, and yet there is clearly an experience. The pricing experience and the brand experience is different from what you would expect. You would expect to see these water bottle brands in a luxury boutique. So then, like, why is this conflict here, right?
Yeah.
That's what interests me. And because marketing has shown that this can be leveraged to the right people at the right time.
Wow. So a lot of it is just kind of planting that seed then, right? In marketing where, you
I would say before you plant the seed, you got to know where to plant.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And the other aspect of it is, I think a lot of times when we talk about a lot of the stuff that falls under the content umbrella or the messaging umbrella, that's the stuff that essentially creates the branding, the bubble of glamour around a product, right? And then what we're talking about, I guess, with this statistical modeling is actually trying to measure whether whatever you did worked,
right,
or not,
and with whom and where, and with what products and at what time. So this is another aspect that we power at TransUnion, which is the cornerstone of marketing, which is consumer segmentation, right? Thinking of like, this is a lovely room. How many people do you think we could fit in here at comfortable cocktail party distance?
40, 50?
40, 50? I think you could squeeze
200.
200?
200.
Let's say two. Like, let's do
I like
this.
my cocktail parties intimate.
Me
I like
too.
it very loose.
So we'll put Darren through this one, right? I want us to imagine 200 people here.
Okay.
And the task for you is I'm going to give you 2 crayons, right, of different colors. And your job is you're allowed to talk in a limited time to talk and interview everyone and get to know who they are and what they like. And your job is to draw a circle around group A and group B. Group everyone into 2 groups such that they are most similar to each other and most likely to be interested in what the others are having to say, having the best conversation.
A crayon.
Right?
Wow.
So how would you think about going about that task?
I don't know. People are talking more and people are not talking.
Right? Just the sheer volume of, you can measure the volume of the conversation and say, why are people here? And that's one way of doing it, right? You could, now I want you to imagine scaling that up. Now, let's say I give you 3 crayons. Let's say I give you 10 crayons, right?
Yeah.
And you have to have 10 groups. And you're allowed to talk to people about like what they like. So I might say, oh, these people are all wearing socks. These people are all not, right? Let's work that.
So how their dress can affect, it could be part of one of the variables you can use to make that decision about what group you're randomly dividing these people, not randomly, but
and you
consciously dividing these people up into.
And you might not have any idea of what the interrelationship is, because it could be that, all my sock wearing people also drive a hybrid. Okay. All my non-sock wearing people, half of them are vegetarians and half are not. What do I make of this? Right.
Yeah.
But as I give you more and more crayons, you can start to get better and better, finer groups. And it's not saying they have to be evenly sized either. You could have a group of 1 and a group of 20, just as long as you use all those crayons, right?
And then you're kind of moving to the groups being homogeneous, like basically kind of the same consistency, same. As the more you're getting better at this, the more and more they all start basically having to essentially look the same in terms of interests and behaviors and other kinds of things, right?
Exactly. And obviously, like, the proxy for this is, instead of like quality of conversation, it's addressability and reception to your product, right? Marketers listening at home, that's what you want to be thinking about, right?
So basically, you're at a cocktail party, you have these crayons, and you yell, "I got hot dog hors d'oeuvres on this side of the room."
Exactly.
And the people who actually walk over to the other side of the room now get marked with a green crayon.
That's a signal. And one way about it too is, like, one strategy is, if you want to have the best conversation, let's say, you could take all the people who are quiet and have terrible conversation skills and put them all in one circle, right? You've increased the positive conversations in the room. Now, to peel back the metaphor here, this is marketing consumer segmentation. And there's many, many folks who apply, their logic to this. There's different amounts of crayons, right?
Yeah.
We have found that 172 is the right amount to be very predictive.
That's the right amount of crayons.
You have
the
to
right amount.
divide it by 172 times.
172 is the pivot of the 6 core demographic attributes that we found to be most predictive on a matrix of cohorts for the national U.S. at a household level.
Wow.
And let's get some guesses as what those 6 are.
I feel like that's too many horoscopes.
It's too many horoscopes, but it's
Right.
better than
I
a
like the
horoscope,
original 12.
right? And the other people go way less, and you can even collapse them down a
But
bit. to more-
172. It's very specific. I like that.
172.
Yeah, I know.
and you and me and everyone falls into one of these segments that we use to power these predictive.
How do I find out what segment I'm in?
I know.
I
I want to know what number is.
I may have looked you up before this. And,
I want to know. I want to know.
we'll have to ask. We'll have
And
to
then I
ask
feel like
Jeremy
I
if I can do that.
I can like wear it on like my lapel.
And again, this almost came to pass. We can talk about what Google was going to try with Flux and try to make that the basis of their new kind of post-cookie pseudonymous identifier. Would it be your federated learning of cohort, your flock, right? Which would be resolved to 1,000, and if you could meet them, it'd be awesome. It'd be 1,000 people just like you.
Yeah.
You have all your shared interests. But the pivot that generates the 172 segments.
You have 6
There's
levers,
6,
right?
There's 6 levers. What do we want to? Let's get some guesses. What's
Okay, so I'm gonna
we have
start,
to put our marketing.
Okay,
hats
I'm
on
gonna
now.
start off from the kind of the psychology side, because this sounds a lot like personality psychology, and the most like kind of strong personality psychology model that we have that seems to work is the Ocean,
Right.
which is openness versus conservatism, like conservative, like be open versus closed.
Right.
Was it conscientious, clean versus non-conscientious, which is messy, extroverted versus introverted, assertive versus non-assertive, and then neurotic versus non-neurotic.
So that's really interesting because you almost done it like, how do I do this with my psychology crayons, right? Because everyone individually falls into that as well.
Yeah, because
and that's
basically
highly-
all personalities, like, are you more extroverted or are you less extroverted? Are you more conscientious, more clean, and everything has to be like appropriate, or you're more messy? Are you more neurotic, which is, are you more susceptible to stress, or are you
Yes.
less susceptible to stress? Are you more assertive, like you're willing to go and negotiate hard in a meeting versus not being hard in a meeting? And essentially, all personality, this is what they found. The way they found it actually in psychology is they took every single personality type they can think of over time, every single description you could find in a dictionary.
Right.
And eventually they found that as you moved one up or down, eventually you found that there's 5 levers that would move all the other ones up or down.
the takeaway being that
Interesting.
that structure is like the most effectively predictive condensation of
And so you guys have 6.
of personality that they found, and that's a personality model. What we have is more of a household consumer demographic model. So psychology are like, those are attributes that are solved for by this, right? We can group based
So-
on knowing your segment.
I imagine age is a big one.
Yeah.
Age is one of them.
Okay,
like
relationship
gender,
status?
relationship.
Gender is thought of as one. We actually don't solve as much for that individual level, so we think of the household level. But
Okay.
so we heard age, we hear income.
So and again,
Relationship.
and you're focused not exactly on an individual. You're thinking about household, right?
we think about household,
Okay.
and then there's meta models.
So like
within
average
this.
age in a household.
Yeah, and part of like household is really important now because it is like the most predictive granular unit, but also like the rise. We've done a lot of research on the rise of like shared purchasing decisions, especially between like folks in a household, like couples, right?
Yeah.
And just like the trend of like, it's really, I know this one firsthand. It's really like difficult sometimes when you and your significant other have different phones. Like I'm Android, but think about
That's
all the
hard.
stuff that benefits in your household from both of you.
me and
being in
Marina have the same thing.
Yeah, being in the same ecosystem.
I never
right?
really thought about that because, like, yeah, if you're in a relationship in your household, your buying patterns are going to be so much more different.
Exactly. So solving it at a household
Okay, so-
level is usually more
But
effective.
I like this game. So age is 1.
Age is one.
Okay. How about education?
That's solved for, but we
With a
think of it
different factor.
with
Okay.
a different factor.
parental status.
Yes. Are there children in the home?
Oh, that's
yes.
a good one.
Okay, what else we got?
Wait, did we say if in a relationship or not in a relationship? Married, not married?
Income.
Age, income.
Income, okay.
Right. And we think about the household income, and we think of the age of like the head of household, whoever's driving the most marketing decisions, right? Some fuzziness here. Age, income, presence of children.
That's interesting.
What's a function of income? How
If they own a house?
your income, like we're in an inflationary period, right? So like
inflation.
income isn't the whole story, right? What subtracts
net worth?
It's your cost of living.
Cost of living.
Right.
It's a
Okay.
backwards way of thinking
what
about it.
percentage of your income has to go to essentials?
So like LA would be such a high cost of living.
And
in
that would
San
affect
Francisco.
the model.
it affects
affects-
it affects
Okay,
the
so
models.
cost of living. So we got age, parental status, income,
cost of living,
cost of living. Okay, we got 4. We need 2 more.
age, parental status.
Things on the level of a household.
I was thinking like, do they own a house or not own a house?
Home ownership is
Okay.
one of them, and the last one is urbanicity, which is a simple scale of. We use a sliding scale of: are you in downtown Manhattan or middle of nowhere, Montana?
So is that like density of
That's
other
the
people around
density
you?
of where you live, and it's almost a different function of. Now that overlaps a lot with cost of living, but not completely, and it's distinctly enough that the models can become inaccurate if you don't absorb and don't account for that as one of those types.
Urbanicity.
Now,
makes a lot of sense.
Now, if you take those and pivot them, and against clusters of different patterns, right? You get up to 172 buckets that you and me and everyone can fit into. Once you have those definitions on lock, then you can come up with predictive attributes. Then you can start saying,
Andrew, are we in the same bucket?
we are not.
Uh-oh.
Well, you're tricky. You are a multi-generational household.
Yes.
Right. And that's think about that. That changes things, right? It's to market to Gene's household. You're talking to a lot of people, and you have to speak differently, right? There's like 3 generations in your house, right? So
4 if you count
4.
Lance.
Yeah, and the dog, right? And we both have dogs, right? But you think about this level of, okay, once you get it down to these groups, they become highly predictive and highly actionable. And there's really interesting correlations amongst those attributes that are very well known. And part of what we do is bring to the table is keeping those lists updated and bringing that intelligence and underpowering our other consumer identity solutions with the attributes, like 15,000 plus attributes that are associated with these groups. But so far, everything I've described to you is modeled, right? None of this is, you don't have to track anyone, spy on anyone just to cut people.
It already exists.
Yeah, just to draw crayons around people. All this is privacy by design, and you can just ask questions, right? A lot of people, this comes from survey data a lot of the time. And, once you know which bucket to place them in, you can build models that extrapolate people's consumer behaviors.
So is there theoretically one of the 172 segments that is the ultimate audience for manipulation games?
We can find out.
Okay, I like that.
First, you need a subscriber list.
Okay.
And then, of course,
I find this topic so fascinating, how you can predict outcomes based on like buckets, putting people in buckets.
Exactly.
And it's already been modeled. You've already figured out the algorithm. And you know what? I see it every single day, in everything, whether I'm on YouTube and I see the same videos. I realize I fit in a bucket of the same type of people who watch the same videos.
And Darren, I don't know if you want to talk about this one, but I had this popped up for me where when they were talking about adding COVID-19 as an additional variable to a model, right? And you've been working on models on the AI.
Oh yeah, it's very similar.
On the prediction for the betting, right?
Oh well,
do you want to talk about it?
yeah.
Just AI in general, I think is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because it falls into a lot of like categorizing things, right?
You're clustering.
Yeah, clustering. You have a graph and you have a bunch of data points and you separate it by lines and you create these different buckets.
So that's why I led with like the crayon example, because really that clustering's being done by machine, but it is like I have such an appreciation for both the art and science components of that task.
Yeah.
Because you can't do one without the other to draw the best possible buckets around people, right?
Yeah.
And that are ultimately most predictive. So some can be on target, some can be off target.
Yeah, and sometimes it just won't work because when you create an algorithm or formula, it has to draw kind of like a curve around, like it looks like a little blob. But if there's outliers, it's hard to go around those shapes.
So that's a great example too. And this kind of leads me to one last really interesting nugget that combines all these concepts,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Combines Bayesian thinking, combines model-based measurement, combines consumer cohort segmentation into the really interesting challenge of, let's say it's a really niche product, right? And you've got some intelligence. Like sometimes it's you don't realize how much marketing we're exposed to every day that's trying to get you to do such a niche long tail action, like refinance your home, switch your mobile carrier over.
Yeah.
These are like high value conversions for the advertiser, but such a niche action that's required. And maybe the penetration rates of who's actually in market to do this is so low with these cohort groups, right? They might index highly. They might be very uniquely indexed against the national U.S. population to be considering to do something like this. That's still not like a huge audience you can go out and target on programmatically, right? So you're really kind of starving for an effective top of funnel hook, right? But guess what? You grouped everyone. You know what their attributes are.
Yeah.
You can now answer the question of how do I move up the funnel to something totally perhaps spurious that still captures all the people I want it to do. And we were essentially able to substantiate what years back Larry Kim of WordStream, at least back then, called the theory of the inverted unicorn. Inverted unicorn theory. And I almost didn't believe this until I saw it for myself. Where I was living in Pasadena at the time. There was a lot of AT&T stores at the time. And this was also peak Game of Thrones mania era, right?
Yeah.
And every single AT&T store out front had a pop-up point-of-sale display, like a big old poster, and it said the three-eyed raven cause for 5G wireless with AT&T when you switch from Verizon. Wait a second. So what are they doing here, right? They realized, okay, it's a harder sell to lean in to switch your carrier, right? Because it's not top of mind. But they know from consumer analysis that, people who are considering are major Game of Thrones fans. So I'm going to lead with that. And not only that, they said, where's the best medium for this campaign? Should this be a digital campaign? No, their research said, make it traditional. Do it on storefront ads in these areas
As people walk by the
where
place
people
in the
are more
mall.
likely to be, right? And it's completely analog. And they may have supplemented that elsewhere, but that's the inverted unicorn. Take the conversion action that is niche and invert that and put above it attributes that play and resonate with other higher funnel.
Interesting.
That's so
valences.
fascinating.
So it's basically like you have a situation where you're offering some sort of service that's really, really needed. Like for some reason I'm jumping straight to I remember we had a DUI lawyer client way back when, right?
Yes.
And when somebody needs a DUI lawyer, it's a very specific moment in time.
Yeah, that's the other MMM, the mobile micro
Right.
moment.
You screwed up. You got caught. You need a lawyer. Up until that point, you could see all these lawyer ads all over the place, but they're not relevant to you. They're not important to you. But all of a sudden, something becomes very relevant. But you're saying essentially through this 172 different segments, right? You could potentially for a very one moment decision type of situation, like buying a car, buying a house, changing carrier service, like these big things. You could find a particular type of person with attributes that might not even be related anything to.
Exactly.
Like needing a DUI lawyer, maybe it's somebody who buys a lot of tequila. Might need a DUI lawyer. I don't know.
When you know more about who you've drawn the circle around, that cohort of people, right, who are all similar to each other on this demographic function and share these attributes, you now have a lot more information available to you that can help you market effectively for when something might be much more unknown or not a known attribute, right? You're using the linkages between people to give you information. And that's an additional Bayesian prior, right?
Wow, yeah.
And part of what this can be is where are they? Where's their attention indexed on social media platforms? Here's how you answer what's the best channel, right? It could be, you can reach 20% of them, but they're extremely highly engaged on LinkedIn, and then you can reach the other 80% of them, but they're no more or less than national average engaged with, email ads, right? So where do you want to go? Usually marketers want to do the Pareto and speak to the 20% of most engaged people, right? So that becomes very, very important for answer the question, how do I start thinking about my consumer base, right? And moreover, who's not going to become my customer? Who's off target?
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're marketing to everyone,
Marketing to nobody.
exactly. So find out who not to talk to.
Just eliminate that giant bucket immediately right off the bat.
Exactly. And say these people are not incremental to you. Maybe someday, and there's other considerations. They could be highly incremental to a competitor, right? So you might have to make the investment in acquiring those people at a loss to screw over your competitor. And this is exactly what Microsoft did with the Xbox, right? Microsoft created the Xbox to screw with Sony.
Yeah, I remember that's a crazy thing.
Right.
Wait, like I don't know the whole backstory.
So
behind it.
Microsoft started Xbox. So essentially, if you think about it, there's like almost a war between Sony
The console wars.
and Microsoft, right? There's major corporations. So them starting the Xbox was like opening a new front in a battle to keep them distracted, because then Sony would have to fight more on the console side.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Could sell
So their goal wasn't to make money with the Xbox. It was just to keep Sony
just disrupt
occupied.
them. That makes sense, because Microsoft, I think they lost money with the Xbox.
Exactly, but their goal was just to.
But they want a strategic advantage. So that's one. But the idea is they wouldn't have been able to enact that strategy if they didn't have an awareness of off-target groups as well. And then they took years and years and years. Now they're taking gaming seriously. But it's a huge question. Who should be non-incremental? Who should not be included in my plan? And that's where consumer cohort intelligence is so valuable when you're bringing a product to market.
Can I just ask you? Okay, this is all fascinating to me. But let's say I want to put this into practice. How do I do this? Is there like a platform, piece of software I can use?
Yeah, we operate a platform, and there's many different ways to engage with it. A lot of times, a company will onboard their customers with us, and we'll say, "Here's what your current customers look like in terms of their attributes and
What their number is."
Yeah, what's their number? And sometimes here's a platform, it's SaaS, buy a seat in it and operate it to do your intelligence. And there's many different ways that this.
So normal people can kind of go and get themselves in the.
I wouldn't say normal people. You have to have a legitimate business.
All right.
But this is just aggregate market intelligence. There's a lot of market research firms out there, or customers' hours. And
I know. Alternatively, also, like, I saw Nielsen segmentation and Taboola as a targeting thing.
Yeah, a lot of those. That's a syndicated audience.
So basically, you're essentially giving that ad platform the tool to be able to use their targeting.
And then you've discovered the end value chain of this. Is once you have your insights, right? Identify, segment, activate, and then measure, right? And that's the full pipeline. And there's very few companies in ad tech that can do that. We're one of them. But others do have some of those pieces out there. And there's other frameworks. There's Mosaic, you may have heard of, another geointelligence platform.
Okay.
It also gets down to the geointelligence of it. Like, who's within walking distance or driving distance of my retail stores? Where should I put my next store? Yeah. When to answer the question, how do billboard companies and traditional channels know who to sell their ad space to and where to put their inventory?
Yeah.
This answers those questions. It's like, what's the approximate value and impressions of the cohorts that are walking by? This is how they're able to know that. Otherwise, it's like magic.
Even if you don't have access to like this tool, right? One of the aspects that you did share with us is actually really valuable is that those 6 parameters that are essentially the most important that move all the other parameters with them.
That's one
and
way.
So
that's
already,
one way to do it.
Already, like, oftentimes we think about age in advertising. It's a pretty standard one, right? But now you can start thinking about. I know that Google audiences have an income control, right? I know that on in Facebook, you're actually able to target people who have kids under a certain age, like kids under 12, kids under 6, right? So it might help you at least identify the levers that are most powerful to pull when you are doing targeting.
It is. It tells you where to go and activate if you want to hit your audience and if you want to recreate that audience. Otherwise, just as you mentioned, those segments, you can syndicate them to your seat in a DSP anywhere, either in walled garden, open web, and that's what you saw from Taboola. That's Neustar Ad Advisor. We kept the name because there's some brand equity there. You can see the Neustar Ad Advisor audiences, which is you can get those raw segments if you want and do your own modeling and cook up whatever you want, or you can buy kind of a standardized taxonomy of.
Yeah. Now I want to know. It's kind of like knowing your your Myers-Briggs identification. Like I want to know the 100.
I want to go.
Number.
Yeah, I want to go to a cocktail party and meet all of my
all the same people in your segment.
So there are some psychographic attributes in there that I don't even know what they are. Like I think I asked you about some of them once, and I'm like there are some ones that are predictive, but there's also self-image attributes. Like Like, do you see yourself as a leader? Is it important for you to set trends on Facebook? Do you listen to what your friends' comments say on social media? Do you do you put a lot of trust in your friends' product reviews on social media?
But those things tend to move with the big six levers, right?
Those are all produce different answers depending on where you are, and those are all indexed against national average.
You know what? One segment I like is people who listen to podcasts versus people who don't listen to podcasts.
Yeah, we need that segment, please.
Exactly.
I want to know who those people are, and then go and just split the line and go right after this group.
Podcasts are of really high interest right now.
Yeah,
because
and because the people who listen to podcasts are very engaged and they sit there for a long time. They have a lot of patience to consume a lot of information for over a long period of time.
You guys really need to get some sponsors.
Oh man!
It's gonna come.
It's coming. We're learning. I remember there's one phrase we were talking about on a phone call a few days ago, and I just remember hearing that phrase. I don't remember what exactly it is, but it's something to do trusting customers. Something.
If people could be trusted to know what they want, they wouldn't need advertising. Yeah.
Okay.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, say that like 2 more times and explain.
The story here is I was invited to Google's Spruce Goose hangar location in Playa, and just beautiful, next to LMU there where my brother went. And really, like half of it, like it was like a 3-hour event, and 2 of those hours were a tour of the amazing meeting rooms they built, and they're amazing, and everything's round, so everyone's equal.
Look at my stuff.
And like the holographic projector table rises out of the ground, and they have like, they called it bisexual lighting, and it's almost like you can't see everything's modular, reconfigurable, and like this was like, isn't it nice? And I'm like,
I mean, Meta just had granola.
Yeah, I know, it's different. I said I knew it'd be nice. I paid for it all, like, but in any case, it was a good opportunity to give Google some cogent feedback on experiences in advertising as a longtime Google partner. And really, like, we kind of had to table the discussion on trust and transparency, and there's subsequent episodes we can dig into that for sure. Mm-hmm. But honestly, there was a really interesting suggestion from another business owner in the room who said, why don't we just lead with self-reported attribution? Why don't we give all the trust to the consumer who we treasure so much to ask them? You've been asked before, how did you hear about us? Drop down radio buttons of like,
but we know from episode Alien Hand Syndrome.
Right.
You can't
do not trust what people say.
No.
What they say is not what they want.
And you're now asking brands to make $1 million planning decisions based on what someone put in a drop down that you're going to make required before they can complete their checkout and get their $2 pair of socks, right?
Yeah.
So, and moreover, but there was a deeper reason why that's wrong. And I stood up and I told this gentleman, I said, I respectfully disagree. If the consumer could be trusted to know what they want, they wouldn't need advertising, which is why we're here, right? I
love that.
I don't think I'll be invited back.
The fact that you had the balls to actually say that.
I was digging into Google quite a bit.
They're still the best.
They're still the best.
They're still the white knight of the industry.
They have such a difficult challenge to solve right now, and everyone's being incredibly unfair to them. And their job is like, it's kind of, the platform's the platform. They're basically saying this is what you get.
Yeah,
you can be on it, and as long as you hit all your goals with us, why are you complaining? And that's completely valid. I just hate PMax because it works.
What is PMax?
PMax. Do we want it? Here's PMax, Gene. Okay. PMax is Performance Max. And here's another scenario for you to visualize.
Is this an algorithm?
It is an algorithm.
Okay.
It's a cross-channel campaign type on Google that is a true black box. It is one point of activation to hit all 8 of Google's platforms with one campaign object, one budget, one list of assets. And it makes a decision in real time. Am I going to put serve to search, display, YouTube, Discovery, Gmail, like App Store, their whole network. So but it's completely black boxed. You don't get the reporting out, right? And
you're just spending money.
You get results. And the most frustrating thing about PMax is that it works, of course. But here's what's happening. Let's say you're walking into a big box store. Let's say Darren's going to Target and he wants to buy what's something you need to buy from Target?
Socks.
Socks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let's say you want like a 20 pack of socks. Your budget is like what's budget for? Your budget is $50, right? If you can
$50.
get your socks for $50, that's a win on your shopping list, right?
Yeah.
And so you're walking in and you go into Target and it's like, oh my God, it's the socks I wanted. $40. Put it in your cart.
Yeah.
You go to checkout and the Target cashier is like, oh, you seem to have gotten the thing you wanted for $40, even though you would have spent $50. And then they just sweep $10 worth of crap off the like checkout counter, candy bars and crap you didn't want into your cart, ring up $50 and say, and they won't even show, you don't even know what you got until you get to the parking lot.
Awful.
And and technically it's like, hey, we got you what exactly you wanted, and
but they're not giving you the lowest price.
Yeah, they could have gotten
they're
it
just
for better, probably. And you don't know for sure. And it does impress, but there's no transparency because you don't get that reporting. And it's a real controversy and part of the reasons why Google is under scrutiny for
That's always been part of marketing, though. You have high value traffic and you have junk traffic.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah,
trickles
but like-
there.
we
but
want to
that's
hack
why-
it and optimize it.
But it's almost anti-Google, right? In some sense, because
It is.
We've talked about all these auction systems, which are based on this next dollar true value paradigm,
and trust.
which at the end of the day, theoretically gets you the most efficient possible price within the auction system, right?
Yeah.
So you're paying the lowest amount
Yeah. It's very fair.
available to you,
Right.
which is very fair. And this is kind of a little bit of a
Because
a
it
deviation from
breaks
that.
the Bayesian prior, because there's no information that you can bring to it outside of what Google has available that gives you any advantage. And you don't know if you could have done better. You don't know how you could have improved other than what you got. And
Okay.
That's kind of scary.
it is kind of scary, but it works.
So let's do Matthew. Where are we at on time?
1 hour.
Oh wow. Okay, let's do a sum up.
Let's do a sum up.
Okay, so this is what I heard. There's six levers you can pull, right, in the statistical model to figure out what happens. To be able to figure out like who your people are, right, and it comes out essentially 172 customer segments. That's kind of the
That's how we approach consumer cohort segmentation. But what matters is whatever's predictive for you, how you want to think about carving up the people in your cocktail party to have the best conversation, right? That's the lesson here, is think of the Bayesian prior that you can apply to create the best conversations and draw the best circles.
Got it.
And then when you're doing things kind of on a big level, there's not very clear attribution sometimes. But essentially, statistical models have gotten to a point where you have the input of what you're doing, you have the black box of what's actually happening in the middle, right? And then you have the output of what happened in your business. And now statistical modeling can tell you like the value of television is this for you, while the value of social media is this for you, while the value of billboards is this for you.
Exactly.
Right? And then I want you to say that phrase one more time.
If the consumer could be trusted to know what they want, they wouldn't need advertising.
I love it.
Invoice Media. Voice your passion.
All right, guys. Thank you guys for joining us on another podcast episode of Manipulation Games, Psychology and Marketing. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us. That
Thanks
was
so much, guys.
fascinating.
This was a hoot.
It was fascinating and scary at the same time, but I think more fascinating than scary. It was amazing.
I was trying to be 50-50. We'll get scarier next time, right?
We'll get a lot more scary because there's a lot of stuff that he can't even talk about, and we've talked about this briefly, but we can't talk about it.
That's right.
Top secret Illuminati type
It's
stuff.
some crazy stuff, but we love it. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Gene. You can watch us on YouTube, listen to us on Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to podcasts. And until next time, we'll see you later.